Back in the year 2031, humans had successfully colonized Mars. This momentous event would lead to the discovery of quantum propulsion, which enabled humans to efficiently travel the vastness of space. However, it would also lead to a string of war and destruction. One instance of this was the atrocity committed by the bloody General James Ford, who dropped a quantum bomb on a space colony, killing millions of people. Because of this, Ford is stripped of his rank and duties as general. Fast forward to the year 2524, a group of soldiers that are stationed on a distant planet encounter an alien civilization for the first time. One of the soldiers, Judah, attempts to call the Alliance to report this first contact. But before she can say whether it is a positive or negative kind of first contact, the aliens silence her. Since this encounter signifies the discovery of life outside Earth, a general named Ryle is immediately summoned back to the Alliance's headquarters to meet the survivors of the encounter. This is despite that night being his rest day. However, he has no choice but to comply. Before turning around back to the headquarters, he asks for Ford's presence. Meanwhile, Ford has just entered a bar where a former soldier of his, Dash, offers him a job that involves money. However, before Ford can answer the offer, a random patron of the bar tells the former general to his face to leave the place due to being a dishonorable figure. But Ford does not move away, deciding instead to assault the patron. This leads to an all-out brawl between the patron's friend and Ford's supporters. Immediately, this fight is halted by the arrival of a group of soldiers led by a man named Marcus. The enthusiastic soldier tells Ford that he is being summoned by the Alliance for an undisclosed reason, adding that Ford's help might lead to his reinstatement as general despite his grave crime. Initially, Ford refuses the offer, but the prospect of reinstatement is just too great to reject. And so, without a word being uttered, Ford accepts the Alliance's summon, with his loyal supporter Dash following him in his decision. Some minutes later, Ford, Dash, and Marcus arrive at the headquarters. There, Ford reunites with his ex-wife Gost, who separated from him due to his horrible crime and his prioritizing of being a soldier more than a husband. Despite Gost's obvious disgust towards him, Ford doesn't care because it is an important mission and it can save his tarnished career. Marcus reveals to Ford and Dash that this mission involves a first contact with an alien life form, surprising the two of them. Being an enthusiastic and jolly soldier, Marcus jokes around with Dash about the alien's physiology and interests, something which disturbs Gost due to his nonchalance about the situation. Due to the possible danger of the encounter, Ford asks for a quantum bomb as a safe and preventive measure. Marcus obliges and quickly asks for the creation of one. As such, a woman named Ardeen, who is supposed to leave for a well-deserved break, is requested to create a quantum bomb. Having no choice, Ardeen creates it, although she is skeptical and worried about its further use. While making it, she asks her surgeon for the reason why a quantum bomb has to be created. However, her surgeon also does not know the reason for this. Afterward, the surgeon scolds a soldier named Braxton, General Ryle's nephew, who is smoking on a landing bay even though it is not allowed. Since Braxton is a lowly soldier, he quickly follows his superior's command. While this happens, the survivors from the mining planet arrive in a spaceship. At first glance, it is already noticeable that there is something wrong with them. The caller from earlier, Judah, is included in this group and she is constantly twitching her head. As they head to the contamination room to decontaminate, Goss wants to interview them to ask if the first contact was positive or negative for either race. However, the surgeon tells her that it is their protocol to decontaminate them first. Despite being told to hold his position, Braxton follows Goss and the surgeon. After the brief decontamination of the survivors, Judah approaches a nearby guard and spits something acidic on his face. She then vomits a black liquid from her mouth in a gruesome display, as well as a dark orb. With this, she signals the other possessed survivors to also start attacking the other guards inside the decontamination room. It is now clear that they are not humans anymore. Braxton has no choice but to shoot one of the survivors who is fast approaching them. He shoots right through the enemy's eyes, killing her immediately. Afterward, Lee, Braxton, and the surgeon close the room. Despite seeing their violent tendencies, Goss still wants to establish communication with the aliens, seeing them as fascinating. With the aliens learning to use guns, the soldiers are now having a hard time fighting them. In just a short period of time, the whole headquarters descend into chaos as the aliens spread their forces parasitically via blood. Amidst the chaos, Ford heads to the base's weapons room to acquire one of the big guns. While this is happening, Ryle has just arrived at the base. Seeing the drastic state of his fellow soldiers, he orders a complete lockdown of the whole base. Eventually, Ryle also joins the fight against the aliens who are slowly spreading by infecting other soldiers in the base. The aliens have the upper hand against them, but Ford shows up with his rocket launcher, effectively blasting their foes and tilting the fight in their favor. In the end, the soldiers emerge victorious. But despite this victory, the many deaths of their allies, including the surgeon, are too heartbreaking and demotivating for the soldiers to take. As such, except for Goss, the remaining survivors of the base decide to eliminate the alien threat even without approval from the Alliance, especially because they have seen firsthand how the aliens manage to adapt quickly in using their guns. Ryle calls this extermination mission Operation Cosmic Sin. Goss still wants them to reconsider their position regarding the aliens and that she thinks there is still a chance to peacefully negotiate with them. But Ford, Ryle, and others have already made up their mind to exterminate their new foes. Braxton also wants to join the upcoming fight, but his uncle Ryle does not want to endanger him. Eventually, Braxton manages to convince his uncle to sign him up. Afterward, the soldiers wear their battle armor. Most notably, Ford wears his old battle armor, prompting Ryle to comment about its ancient appearance. However, the smart Ardeen warns them that the black object vomited earlier by Judah might be used as a tracking device by the aliens. She adds that they should be careful with the handling of the very fragile quantum bomb because its explosion can take out their whole solar system if handled wrong. Due to needing someone that can handle the quantum bomb as well as provide knowledge about technologies, Marcus orders her to come with them. Ardeen accepts the rogue mission even though she does not want to. And so the soldiers consisting of Ford, Ryle, Marcus, Dash, Braxton, Lee, and Ardeen make their preparation. While this happens, the soldiers talk and bond even though some of them do not know each other that well. Here, Ford and Goss find this opportunity to talk with each other about their storied past. Goss tells Ford that if they ever survive their ordeal, he can buy her a drink at the bar. At the same time, Dash inquires to Ardeen about the teleportation that they will do. Ardeen nonchalantly warns him that there is a slim possibility that the teleportation process can go wrong, enough to scare Dash. On the other hand, Marcus wonders why Ryle calls for Ford's presence earlier despite his infamous reputation as the Blood General. Ryle believes that Ford's skills and decision-making can be useful in dealing with the aliens. After preparing, the band of soldiers finally teleports to the planet called Alora, where a space battle between humans and aliens is currently happening. Because the teleportation is slightly off, the 6 soldiers have to pass through the space battle. Although they manage to come right through the debris and projectiles from the space battle, they still encounter a problem upon entering the planet. At first, only Marcus, Braxton, and Ardeen manage to land on the planet safely. Ryle, Ford, and Goss are nowhere to be found, and their communications are offline. They then get ambushed by some aliens, managing to fatally wound Marcus in the surprise attack. Here, some survivors from the space battle help Marcus and others defeat their enemies. However, tension arises between the two groups because they are both skeptical about whether the other is infected or not. After identifying each other, the two groups combine for the time being, and Braxton decides to lead this group. Because the area is said to be surrounded by aliens, Braxton and a yellow-haired soldier named Saul scout the vicinity to check for enemies while the rest retreat to the nearby medical bay. There, they stumble upon an enemy ship. While observing the aliens from afar, Braxton is alerted that Ford might have survived the earlier re-entry. Hearing his legendary and infamous name, Saul feels relieved that the Blood General is on their side. Because Braxton's communication is busted, Saul suggests that they should head to the nearby orbital cannon where a communication bay is located so Braxton can re-establish the signal. Meanwhile, Ford has just landed on the planet. Immediately, he is surrounded by the hooded aliens. However, instead of attacking him, they perform a gesture for Ford to enter their cave. Due to being on enemy territory, Ford has no choice but to comply with their wishes. Inside the cave, he sees a figure in white. He begins to hallucinate, seeing Goss instead in place of the figure. Fortunately, Braxton arrives just in time to save Ford from his illusion by shooting the figure down. Despite knowing that the figure was an alien disguised as his wife, Ford is still left dazed and confused with what he had seen and felt at that moment. With Ford rescued, Braxton and Saul walk alongside the Blood General toward the orbital cannon. After a while of walking, the three finally arrive at the orbital cannon. Ardeen and the others are already there. There, Ardeen informs Braxton that they have to fire the quantum bomb manually at the planet's orbit because there is too much interference in their signal that prevents them from using teleportation. This information enrages Braxton. Ford checks in on Marcus' health because he is visibly in pain, and the usually strong-willed Marcus tells him that he is afraid. Seeing that he is not going to make it, Ford decides to mercy kill the soldier, something which Marcus does not even protest. As such, Marcus swiftly dies. Braxton confronts Ford about this, and Ford tells him that Marcus is going to die anyway from his wound. Braxton then takes Marcus' dog tags as a sign of respect. Just then, Dash walks into the room, confirming that he has survived the earlier fall. He concludes from the somber atmosphere that someone must have died. Later, Ardeen sees that the aliens have created a gigantic quantum space gate right above the planet. Since the space gate can be used to travel from one point in the universe to another, the aliens can teleport their army to the planet, thereby dooming the soldiers there. Because of this, Braxton proposes that they should just use the quantum bomb to eliminate both them and the aliens. However, due to his earlier interaction with the aliens, Ford tells them that the aliens do not want to destroy them because the aliens need them like some sort of colonization. Ardeen proposes that they shoot the quantum bomb toward the space gate instead. The worst-case scenario is that if they fail, they will get sucked in by the black hole which the quantum bomb will produce. Since it is part of their job to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, they accept this risk. Afterward, Dash takes Ford aside and secretly tells him that they should abandon the mission. However, Ford refuses this, telling Dash instead that he is free to do whatever he wants. Due to his former superior's conviction, Dash is inspired to follow through with the mission. Dash later encounters a child who was one of the survivors. Seeing this bright-faced girl is enough to motivate Dash to protect her and the rest of humanity. As such, the soldiers, along with the other survivors of the space battle, gather at the gate of the orbital cannon to defend the outpost from the aliens. They are doing this until the outpost system turns online again. Once it turns online, they can now use the orbital cannons to fire the quantum bomb toward the space gate. Saul explains that opening the outpost doors will cause the aliens to charge in, surely turning the corridor where they are standing into some sort of bloody room. As they all wait for the attack, Ford talks with Ardeen, advising her that she should keep her soldierly life a secret from the people she loves back home or else they will despise her. With this advice, Ardeen walks back alone to the system's room to reconfigure the system and attach the quantum bomb to the orbital cannon. Just then, she hears Ryle communicating with the outpost, confirming that he is actually still alive. It turns out that Ryle failed to enter the planet and is just currently floating right outside Allura. He asks Ardeen if his nephew is still alive. After confirming that Braxton has survived the entry earlier, Ryle tells Ardeen that he will head to the quantum gate and trigger its self-destruction, killing him in the process. His only request is for Ardeen not to tell Braxton about this plan because he knows that his nephew will prevent him from following through with his fatal plan. Besides, Braxton thinks that his uncle is dead anyway. Later, Ford and the others assemble that the doors have finally opened it. However, to their surprise, Goss walks out from the shadows. She is now infected by the leader of the aliens. The one that is most shocked by this is Ford, who is taken aback by what he had just seen. The alien possessing Goss mocks Ford, telling him that Goss' body is suitable for possession because it agrees with the aliens. All of a sudden, Goss temporarily regains control of her body and informs her allies that the parasitic aliens use their bodies as vessels to control. But this is only brief as the alien overtakes Goss' consciousness again, explaining to the soldiers that their alien race is called Segia and that it is built around the concepts of war and domination. She offers them a chance to surrender while there is still an opportunity to do so. Not wanting to succumb to the aliens' demands of domination, Dash quickly rejects the idea of being colonized by the aliens. With this rejection, the aliens launch an all-out attack against the soldiers, which even includes some advanced alien drones. A battle has finally commenced between the two sides. With numbers and experience on their side, the aliens make quick work of the survivors. They immediately get inside the outpost with ease. Only the battle-hardened soldiers such as Braxton and Saul manage to survive the onslaught. But even then, the aliens are too powerful and many for them. Even Braxton almost dies against one of the aliens. Later, Ford holds onto one of the drones that are hovering away. This drone in particular is carrying the infected Lee. Meanwhile, Ryle is now floating in front of the space gate. At this exact moment, the orbital cannon system is now back in action. Ardeen has now loaded the quantum bomb into the orbital cannon, and all she has to do is to confirm the launch coordinates. Simultaneously, Goss' drone reaches the space gate. Because Ford has been holding onto the drone, he comes face to face with his infected ex-wife, who is now leading the alien army. At this point, Ardeen has launched the quantum bomb into the space gate. Due to Goss' presence there, the bomb is stopped before it comes through the space gate using some sort of force field. Ford tries to approach Goss, but he is pushed back into the dark space by his infected ex-wife. Meanwhile, Ryle tells Ardeen that he cannot make the remaining fuel in his battle armor explode. As such, he asks Ardeen to just point the orbital cannon toward him, which will then trigger a chain reaction that will cause a great explosion in the space gate. Here, the wounded Braxton walks in and hears their conversation. Seeing him, Ryle says goodbye to his nephew. Braxton refuses this, but he knows that there is nothing that he can do. Having no choice, both Braxton and Ardeen emotionally direct the orbital cannon toward Ryle and use it to launch a rocket. The rocket hits Ryle point blank, causing an explosion that is large enough to destroy the space gate. Due to the explosion, the space gate immediately collapses in itself, creating a black hole. Fortunately, it closes before it can affect Elora and everything nearby, which means that the black hole has opened instead on the alien side of the universe. This effectively destroys the whole Sigen fleet that is waiting behind the space gate. With this, it turns out the Gauss push is actually a blessing in disguise for Ford, who is now floating back toward Elora. Meanwhile, Braxton walks back to the bloody corridor where many survivors and aliens alike were killed. He sees a surviving alien, and Braxton pours all of his pent-up anger and rage toward the alien, beating the alien to a pulp. 7 days later, after the first contact with the Sigens, the Alliance's Senate leader back on Earth finally reveals to the people the notable yet violent event that had just transpired a week ago. The announcement speaks of the Sigens' unconditional surrender due to the actions of the heroic soldiers who managed to curb the alien threat before it got worse. The remaining soldiers from Operation Cosmic Sin get back to the bar to silently celebrate their collective achievement. However, it is also evident on their faces that the operation scarred them for life. In the background, the Alliance's Senate leader is continuing his rousing speech that talks about how their empire and the human race as a whole would last for 1,000 years more. There, Ford remembers his ex-wife's words about buying her a drink if they managed to survive. For this reason, Ford decides to honor her memory by drinking one last alcohol before walking away from the bar.